I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler. Coming up on Football Today.
It drops here for Felipe Caicedo. That's Immobile! And they've done it yet again!
And Ospina in all sorts of trouble. Immobile! 20 goals for the season.
Messi, Ronaldo, Mbappe, Lewandowski. Each one has less goals this season than Ciro Immobile. And on Saturday, the Lazio striker scored his 20th goal of the season in the club's 1-0 victory against Napoli. The win was their 10th straight, a new club record. But despite his prolific form and Lazio's success, he isn't thought of as an elite striker. Today we ask, why is Italy's most prolific forward so underrated?
I think it's safe to say that much like Lazio's season, his season is going magically well.
Nima Tavallaey covers Italian football for SempreInter.com and Goal.
This is his best season since he turned professional. Not just because of the goals he's scoring for Lazio and the national team, but also because of how he's playing. He's thriving under Simone Inzaghi in this Lazio. Now, he's always scored goals for Lazio since joining them. He's already scored 107 goals for them in just over 3.5 seasons. But this season, he's reaching levels that I don't think anyone was expecting him to reach.
So when I've watched Lazio games, I've always been impressed by his movement off the ball, but for someone who hasn't seen him play, how would you describe his game?
Well, it's quite interesting because he's a poacher in one sense, but his strength has always been his movement, as you say. So he could sometimes, earlier in his career when he didn't do so well, you could see that his movement was wrong and he got into situations wrong. His read of the game was perhaps his weakest aspect of his game, but that's something that experience he's managed to file away those defects, and his read of the game is now better than it's ever been. His movement is great. His finishing, he has the ability to finish early and to get the angles right, and I think that's his strength. He's very quick into getting into situations and converting.
In preparation for this episode, I saw that current Parma president Demetrio Albertini has compared Immobile to Hernan Crespo.
He is reminiscent of Crespo in many ways. He's a bit less skillful and more physical, but they both have an uncanny ability to lose their marker.
Who would you compare him to?
You know, he doesn't really remind me of this player in terms of the style, but it does kind of remind me of how people used to describe Raúl in Real Madrid, in that if you were to rate Raúl from 1 to 10, he would get 7s in everything. He wouldn't be the best at anything. So that's very similar to how Ciro Immobile is. He's not the best in the world at heading. He doesn't have the best shot, but he's got like 7 8s and everything. So that makes him that's why he scores so much. But he doesn't get the big headlines either. He doesn't have the best technique. He's not the best in the air. As I said, his shooting is not the best, but he's not the worst either. And he's actually pretty good at it. So I would say on a rating of 1 to 10, he's got 7 8s in most things. So he doesn't really have one strength per se. He's just reasonably good at everything, and that is his strength.
Let's back up a little bit. Was Immobile always destined to be this good? Was he one of those wonder kid youth players?
He was a huge talent. He was growing up. I mean, he's from Naples, or Torre Annunziata, in the province of Naples. And, you know, he scored a lot, which has always been his strength, scoring goals, which is why he was signed when he was just 18 by Juventus. However, he never really got going there because a striker at Juventus has to be more than a poacher, and he was loaned out to a couple of teams until he came ahead of the 2011 season to Pescara under the watchful eye of Zdenek Zeman, who, if he's lacking tactically, Zeman, one thing he is absolutely brilliant at, and if not the best and one of the best, it is to get young players and get them to explode and to get them to train them in the right way so they take the next step. Ciro Immobile famously being part of that amazing trio in Pescara of Marco Verratti and Lorenzo Insigne, and together they just played champagne football at Pescara, and they won promotion to the Serie A, and Immobile scored 28 goals, becoming the top goal scorer of the Serie B, and they were absolutely fantastic.
That's remarkable that those three really good players were all on the same team at the same time, in the second division in Italy. So after he has that incredible season, what happens to him next at Genoa?
Well, he goes there. That's his first real season in the Serie A. He struggles, understandably, like most players, and is in a team that also struggles in the Serie A. He only scores 5 goals, but he does manage to score against Juventus, team that he was co-owned by at the time. But that season Genoa struggled a lot, and they barely managed to escape relegation. It was a disappointing season. He was pretty young at the time, and he didn't deliver expectations. Lorenzo Insigne did. Marco Verratti was fantastic at PSG, and they were then things were being said, or this rumor, or not rumor, this reputation started about him not maybe being just another poacher, not being a good footballer, something that has kind of plagued him throughout his entire career, where people say that, oh yeah, he scores goals, but he doesn't score enough. He's the kind of player who doesn't raise teams. He needs good players around him to be able to lift, etc. And that's something that's followed him throughout his entire career, and that kind of started after that season in Genoa. But he was only there for one season because he was bought Genoa's half, because back then you had co-ownerships in Italy, and his 50% of his rights were bought by Torino, Juventus crosstown rivals.
So you're saying that this reputation that's, followed him around the whole decade really started when he was just 22 or 23 years old.
Yeah, it really has. This reputation has been following him around for quite some time, and it's really unfair, because football's about scoring goals, and you need to have players to score them. And it's not a chance that he scored so many goals that he has. So he has a relatively disappointing season with Genoa, and then he goes to Torino, who pay for half of his rights, as you said, because of the co-ownership. And it's kind of there that he has his breakout season and really takes off again. Break down what happens at Torino and kind of how that launches the following years of his career. That season, he wins he's coached by probably one of the Italy fans, or the fans of the Italian national teams. They remember with dread, because of this was the coach who failed to get Italy to the World Cup for the first time in over 60, 70 years. But together they managed to do really well. He becomes the Serie A top goal scorer, where he's backed up by Alessio Cerci, who provides a lot of assists, but also a lot of movement. He becomes the first Torino player to become the Serie A top goal scorer since Francesco Graziani in 76-77, and 76-77, and he scores 22 goals, and he's absolutely brilliant.
So half of his rights are owned by Juventus, and he just won the scoring title. At this point, why don't they keep him?
Well, they don't really do. But what happens is that Torino want to cash in on Immobile because they receive a big offer, around 20 million euros from Borussia Dortmund in the Bundesliga. Now, there's a lot of fighting going around between Juventus and Torino, that when a player is co-owned by two teams, both teams have to accept the offer Torino say they had. So there's a bit of arguing going on, but what happens is that Juventus sell their 50% to Torino for around 8 million euros, and Torino sell Immobile to Borussia Dortmund for 18 million, just under 18 million euros.
So how does his time at Dortmund go?
It's a complete failure. It's an utter disaster. He barely scores. He's not happy there. But the funny thing is, though, he does score 4 goals in their Champions League games. But as a whole, he does not do well there at all. He does poorly in the Bundesliga, but in the Champions League he scores 4 goals, and is kind of the reason why Dortmund feel that, they don't want to give up on him. They feel that maybe he's not ready to play for them. But at the same time, they see the talent and recognize the talent. They don't want to take the loss and are hoping that when they loan him to Sevilla the following season, he does well there. And so they can hopefully cash in on him.
And obviously his time at Sevilla doesn't go so well either. And in the summer of 2016, Dortmund decide to cut their losses, and he goes to Lazio for a small fee of 8.75 million euros, which kind of brings us, closer to today. What impact has he had on Lazio since joining?
Nothing but an unmitigated success. I mean, it's been an absolute success from the first minute he stepped onto the pitch for Lazio. That first season, he scored 26 goals. The following season, 41 goals.
Marusic with the header. And guess who? It's Ciro Immobile again. This quite wonderful season for Immobile. Just keeps going from strength to strength.
And then last season was the first season that he had a bit of a dip, scoring only, in quotation marks, 19 goals. He's been so important for Simone Inzaghi and his brand of football, together with Milinkovic-Savic, with Luis Alberto, with all these players for Lazio. He's been putting the goals away for Lazio. And his 86 goals he scored in the Serie A alone for Lazio in 3.5 seasons, which is really, really rather remarkable.
He's been so remarkable since joining Lazio, and we mentioned, a little bit of his previous history, scoring lots of goals in Italy in select seasons. So what is the perception of him?
Well, I think the perception amongst non-Lazio fans, the observer, the occasional observer mainly, is that he's a kind of a player of a past in football, in the sense that he's a poor man's Filippo Inzaghi. He's a goal scorer, he's a poacher, and that, he only scores against poor teams, and all that nonsense that comes with it. I personally think that is complete drivel, because you don't score 110 goals in the Serie A if you're not a good player. You don't consistently score almost 200 goals before the age of 30 in the top European leagues, in the Champions League, Europa League, if you're not a good player. This notion, it's rather ignorant, to be perfectly honest with you, to say that about him. He is a good player, a very good player. And this season, he's having an almost Luca Toni season, where, as Luca Toni famously had in 2006, going into the World Cup, where he scored 31 goals. I mean, he's played 17 games for Lazio. He scored 19 Serie A goals. That's amazing. That's absolutely insane. He scored twice for the national team. He scored 3 times for the national team in the calendar year of 2019 in 4 games. He's not been starting most of those games either. So I think, you need to respect that he's having the season of his life. And he is a player who I think people disrespect at their own peril, because he's shown that he's on his way to winning his 3rd Serie A top goal scorer award. In 2017-2018, together with Mauro Icardi, he scored 29 goals and won his 2nd Serie A top goal scorer award. And now he's en route to winning his 3rd, which is something that would put him up there with the greats of Italian football.
You mentioned Pippo Inzaghi. His manager at Lazio was Simone Inzaghi, Pippo's brother, and he said that Immobile was one of the 3 or 5 best attackers who we've had in Italy over the last 15 years.
I couldn't agree with him more. I think he's absolutely right. The thing is, though, that the brand of style of football that he plays is not very fashionable today. Everybody wants to play in a 4-3-3 with a single striker who is either like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, a strong presence and technical, or you have the false 9 nonsense that Barcelona have. Immobile is a player that he needs to play in the 2-man attack, and he does it really well. He doesn't really excel on the wings, but if you play him in a 2-man attack, or if you play him in a 1-man attack with a support man behind him, a number 10, a trequartista, then he will get you goals, and his movement will get other people goals as well. This season, especially this season, he's shown that he can create space and create play for his teammates, and he's developing that aspect of his game as well.
His first 2 seasons, as we've mentioned, he was in as prolific goal-scoring form as anyone other than Messi, scoring 67 goals in 88 games. And that second year that he was tied with Mauro Icardi for the lead in Serie A for goals, he actually missed 5 games due to a hamstring injury. And at the time, he was only 28 years old. So you have to wonder, why didn't any big team come in for him at that time? I mean, he's in the peak of his powers and by all intents and purposes, one of the best strikers in all of Europe. Why is he still on Lazio?
Well, that's what I mean. I think it's one of those issues where you're born in the wrong time. You know, his qualities are not what the biggest teams in Europe are looking for when they're looking for a number 9. He's not a target man. You know, he's not a false 9. He's a classic number 9. He's a poacher, similar to Icardi. It's not a sexy name because of his failure at Borussia Dortmund and Sevilla, players who guarantee them what they want in terms of how they play and move. Simone Inzaghi is the biggest talent up and coming in terms of, he's not up and coming, he is the next big Italian super coach, in my opinion. And he plays with 2 strikers. Antonio Conte plays with 2 strikers. I think football is about cycles. And this 4-3-3 tiki-taka total football renaissance is thankfully dying out now. I think what we're seeing now is a reversal, or not reversal, but an updated form of the 2-man striker is on its way now. I think we've had a decade of the 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 players. And I think what we're seeing now is a move away from that. You know, everything in history goes in cycles, not circles. So does football.
He has 116 career goals in Serie A, which is roughly the same amount as Letán, Mario Icardi, Higuaín, and he's played roughly the same amount of games. So why don't we mention him kind of in those same breath as those elite strikers?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I tweet out respect Ciro hashtag quite often, actually. I think he does deserve respect. And I think that this season, I mean, if he were to continue on this like this, he would score almost 40 goals. And he would beat the record that Gonzalo Higuaín equaled a few seasons ago with Napoli as having scored the most goals in one Serie A season. I think he's en route to beating that. And if he does, if he continues to do that, then he'll also win the European Golden Boot as Europe's top goal scorer. And then you have a European Championship where I don't expect him to start. I think Belotti will start because he suits Roberto Mancini's system better. But who better to have come in when you're chasing a goal than this guy who scores for fun? And I think he will play an important role for Italy. And I think Italy will surprise a lot of people. As for Lazio this season, I think they are definitely going to be one of fighting for a Champions League spot. I don't think they will be fighting for a league title. I think that's between Inter and Juve. But they will definitely, together with Roma, will be fighting for that 3rd spot. And I think they have a very good chance of getting it.
You mentioned him with Italy. You said he scored 3 goals in 2019. But from the outside, when I was doing research, it seemed like that was actually one of the main reasons why he actually isn't really more respected internationally and in Italy, is because of his form with the national side, having only scored 5 goals in 19 appearances.
Well, yes, but at the same time, you have to remember that during his time coming up as a youngster, the Italian national team has perhaps been at its lowest level in terms of quality in its entire history. Let's remember that Graziano Pelle was starting for Italy a few years ago in the European Championships. A player that under normal circumstances wouldn't even make it to the Italian 5th team. But now it's changed. Italy has a golden generation coming up in every position, from goalkeeper to striker. And he's now 29 years old, and this is his moment to shine. And I think a successful European Championship and a successful season, if he were to become the Serie A goal scorer, top goal scorer for the 3rd time, if he were to win the European Golden Boot, if he were to maybe become the top goal scorer at the European Championships, which I wouldn't put it past him of doing, then I think all of this will change. Because you know how it is. The winners write history. History is written by winners. And if he were to win with Italy and lead them to glory, then all of this will be forgotten.
So he has a legacy-defining 12 months coming up ahead of him.
Absolutely. You know, Lazio shouldn't, if you look at their revenues and how they're built, I mean, if you just go by the money league, they shouldn't be where they are. They're an extremely well-run club, despite their fans disliking their president. He's done an absolutely amazing job with their sporting director, Ilitare. They're going to come to the Champions League. I think there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be one of the teams there. I see them sinking back, but I don't see them collapsing. Not this season. They look so solid defensively, and they are lethal going forward. I mean, if they were to do that, that's an amazing accomplishment. They've already won the Italian Super Cup. They've already won the Coppa Italia, dethroning Juventus of all teams from both of those titles. So the next thing now for both of them is to get to the Champions League, and for Immobile to try and make his mark with the Italian national team, because let's remember that he knows it as well that he shouldn't move. At Lazio, he has that space. Lazio are a good top team in the Serie A. They play in Europe every year. You know, he's unlucky in that maybe he was born in the wrong era of football to play for one of the big teams and win titles. But what he's done and I mean the big titles such as the Serie A title, the Champions League, etc. But with Lazio, he has won titles. He's won personal glory, and I think he could, if he were to do that with Italy, he would, as you say, he's got career-defining 12 months ahead of him.
You can read Nima Tavallaey on sempreinter.com and Goal, and listen to him on the Serie A Show podcast. The show is produced by John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and this was Football Today. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.